pretty skeptical when Big Finish Productions announced their Dark Gallifrey set, which is essentially a series of trilogies revolving around dark or evil versions of Time Lords or evil Time Lords proper. We've got a trilogy of Morbius stories dropping over the next 3 months. Then it's The War Master, then it's TBC, but I imagine there'll be stuff like the Rani, like maybe Rassilon and others, and Missy, etc., and the Monk or the Nun, things like that. I was a bit skeptical when I first heard about it because I just thought, why don't you just do a normal War Master set? Why don't you just do another Missy set as opposed to giving it this other branding? I'm not sure, but we're here now, and we have Dark Gallifrey Morbius Part 1, which is written by Tim Foley and stars Samuel West as Morbius, aka the Time Lord from The Brain of Morbius, and other Big Finish productions as well, particularly some encounters with the Eighth Doctor and Sheridan Smith around 20 years ago, blimey. So we've got this trilogy of stories here. This is a 3-parter for all intents and purposes, 3-hour-long stories which are part of this Morbius story, and then we've got the War Master after that. So this is essentially, and sorry if this sounds a little bit simplistic, this is essentially the Voyage of the Demeter, aka that chapter in Dracula where the Demeter ship has that horrific voyage where Dracula's coffin is being moved from country to country and Dracula decides to have a bit of a midnight feast. It's the last voyage of the Demeter, but instead of Count Dracula, it's the Time Lord Morbius, or more specifically, his followers. For those of you who don't know the Time Lord mythology, the first president of Gallifrey was Rassilon, and then after that, after Rassilon, there was another president of Gallifrey whose name has been lost to time, and it changes depending on who is telling the story, but there was a tyrant who wanted to overthrow that president, and that tyrant was Morbius, and his is the name that has gone on through the history books, through the memories. During the massive conflict, the first war between Time Lords and Time Lords, which was called the Great Schism, Morbius ended up losing. One of the big battles was on the planet of the Sisterhood of Khan, and after that big battle, the ship Proteus, filled with Time Lords and a couple of members of the Sisterhood of Khan, is leaving the battlefield, going back to Gallifrey, and on the ship are some prisoners, some war criminals who were followers of Morbius, who are still loyal to him, and you also have this young member of the Sisterhood of Khan, played by Mina Anwar on the cover here. She was just initiated a couple of months ago, and this is like her first proper encounter with the Time Lords. You've got Captain Argento, played by Rachel Atkins, who has been grievously injured during the conflict, and you have these prisoners as well. So this ship is on its way back to Gallifrey after leaving the planet Khan, but their trajectory is changing due to orders from the High Council, and the crew don't know about it, so the captain is keeping that firmly under wraps. And you've got this rookie member of the Sisterhood of Khan, Rolko, who is meeting the captain for the first time. Let's play a clip from Morbius Part 1.
That's all we need.
What is that?
Probably the prisoners.
The prisoners?
You're not our only passenger on board.
Men of Morbius?
Yes. The last stragglers.
Is it wise to bring them with you?
Now, don't worry, they're no threat. We found them all digging a great trench in the Blessed Valley, weak and emaciated. We think they were trying to bury themselves alive.
What will happen to them?
Not sure. I hope they'll get a fair trial. Not everyone agrees. That's not for the likes of me to decide. Something for the council to deal with when we're back. Right, these are the captain's quarters. It's dark in there, so be careful. And if the captain seems a little cruel, just grin and bear with it. And whatever you do, don't ask what's wrong with her.
Hello?
Captain, I have our guest from the Sisterhood.
Close the door. I want the lamps removed from the passageway out there, bleeding into my quarters.
That won't be very practical for the crew. It will be done. This is Gilda.
Step forward.
I bear greetings from the Sisterhood
I don't need those. Where's the elixir?
I have my supply with me.
Show me.
I have 8 bottles of the elixir.
Give me one.
Captain, you don't need to... Just a drop is enough to...
This stuff has got a kick to it.
I'll keep it safe.
I'll hang on to this one.
I really dug this. Like I said, it's the last voyage of the Demeter, except instead of Count Dracula, it's Morbius, and that's such a cool conceit for a horror story. My only reservation about unambiguously recommending Dark Gallifrey Morbius Part 1 is because it is unambiguously the first part of a 3-part story. It's a really great opener, but just as you get the sense that things are escalating and you get these great like character dynamics which are starting to reveal themselves and unfurl over the course of the story, it ends, and now you have to wait until next month for the next hour of the story, and then you've got another month to wait for the conclusion of this trilogy. So my recommendation is to wait for the full trilogy to come out and see how it sticks the landing. If, or at least if you trust my reviews, if you trust the reviews of other people who review Big Finish as well, or word of mouth and public opinion and such, I recommend waiting until the trilogy is finished. But I can say that Morbius Part 1 is a really good first chapter, really moody and atmospheric. I think that the character dynamics are really well fleshed out, considering that it's not exactly an original setting or an original formula, but it gets so much mileage out of this, because like it's not just the fact that you have this ship full of Time Lords who have been traumatized through this massive conflict involving a member of their own race, Morbius, but also that after the conflict was over on the planet Khan, they had to wait for weeks and months for this ship to be ready for them to leave to go to go back to Gallifrey, to go home again, and they've gone a little bit stir crazy, and they're quite desperate to be there, and they're quite desperate to get back home. And Rachel Atkins is the captain as well, so like hard bitten as well, and clearly she's not quite mentally there anymore after what's happened with the Great Schism, and how she's now relying on the Sisterhood of Khan's like medicine to treat her wounds and everything that happened during the conflict. When it's revealed what happened to her and why she's so injured and how her injury has manifested itself, it's really dark stuff, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how Morbius Parts 2 and 3, like how it builds upon that or carries that on. I'm really looking forward to that. If you're wanting to hear Samuel West as Morbius, who is reprising his role playing Morbius in other Big Finish productions, you're not going to get much of that here, but that's fine. Like I said, this is an opening chapter, and it's more setting up the supporting cast members who we're going to be following over the course of the next few months, and also some of the dangling plot threads. Like in The Last Voyage of the Demeter, the movie, there's like, they bring a woman on board who has been injured, and that's like a bad omen, of course. Like, oh, you know, bringing a woman on board a ship is a bad omen, but in this case, it takes the form of somebody just floating in space in the vortex, the Shimmering Man, who is played by Justin Avoth, and it's like, what on earth is his deal? Why is he literally shining? Is this to do with Morbius? What's going on here? And there's some really cool, like, temporal horror, but like that's really understated. I would have loved to have seen this like depicted on screen proper as well. Like how they're going through the vortex and something is happening to the inner dimensions of the ship, where the walls over the course of the weeks and months are progressively getting smaller. That's such a cool idea, like legit really creepy, and how it like affects the crew as well mentally, because they've got the prisoners, the ones who are still faithful to Morbius, and it's like they're thinking, oh, this is some sort of weird Time Lord tactic to like break them mentally by making our cells smaller and smaller, and the other Time Lords on the ship are like, no, we have no idea why this is happening, what, help. So really cool ideas. And Tim Foley is just a terrific writer. He just gets some really great characterization out of what could have just been arch archetypes. Like you've got the first mate who you heard in the clip there, who's trying to help this young member of the Sisterhood, who is like way out of her depth, and the first mate knows it. Where he's trying to be supportive, firm but fair. And like I said, I think that the producers in the behind the scenes documentary, they referred to this more like the Dark Gallifrey series generally as like Tolkien's The Silmarillion, from like Middle Earth. And while that is, I think, an appropriate comparison, I do like the idea that maybe these Dark Gallifrey stories are going to be drawing more from like specific horror films or horror fiction, like Dracula. That's what this one is, I think, pretty unambiguously about, especially since, you know, Brain of Morbius is tying into Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster. So actually making this more akin to Dracula is a real cool, like, role reversal of who we know Morbius to be as a character from the TV series proper. Very Hammer horror. Philip Hinchcliffe would be proud. My only concern, like I said, is that this is part 1 of a 3-parter. So who knows if it's going to stick the landing. Still a really effective opener. Still a really good, haunting 70 minutes of Big Finish audio that I really, really enjoyed. Let's see how this story goes. Thankfully, we don't have too long to wait. Morbius Part 2 drops next month, and then in June, we've got Morbius Part 3, which will also star Tom Baker as the 4th Doctor. So yeah, bring on Dark Gallifrey. They've done a really good job with just this release of turning me around on the Dark Gallifrey concept. Like I said up front, I was just thinking it's just a weird branding exercise that really just obfuscates things for the average listener. But if they play their cards right, this could be a really cool offshoot of the Doctor Who universe. So, colour me impressed. You know, Tim Foley can rarely do any wrong, and I'm looking forward to seeing Samuel West, or hearing Samuel West, I should say, you know, stretch his legs, spread his wings, put his wonderful dulcet tones in my ears. Yeah, looking forward to next month's release.